What if everything we believed about Prince Harry's picture-perfect family, his California home, his fairy tale escape from royal life, his two adorable children, was nothing more than a carefully crafted illusion? And what if, on his 40th birthday, in a quiet room away from the cameras and the chaos, Prince Harry finally let the mask slip? He didn't say it in an official statement. There was no press release, no Oprah 2.0. Just a chilling confession to someone close, and a sentence that would echo through the corridors of both Hollywood and Buckingham Palace alike. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. I am not their biological father. You might be shaking your head. Could this really be true? After all the documentaries, the family photos, the baby showers, and the countless PR campaigns built around Archie and Lilibet, could it all have been a lie? For years, the media speculated. For years, whispers danced through social feeds, hushed royal circles, and insider tabloids. People asked, why don't we see the kids? Why do the timelines feel off? Why does even Prince Harry himself seem distant, like he's playing a role he didn't rehearse for? And now, everything is starting to make sense. This story isn't just about one confession. It's about 1,000 little cracks in a foundation that was never as solid as it appeared. It's about missing documents, hidden diary entries, out-of-sync timelines, silent birthdays, unregistered births, and friends turning against each other. It's about deception and denial, and what happens when a man who once walked behind his mother's coffin decides he's done walking behind lies. Let's be clear. This isn't just a story about royalty. It's about identity, legacy, and what it truly means to be a father in a world where image is everything. So why did Prince Harry wait until 40 to speak the truth? And why now, when his public image is already hanging by a thread? Let's go back, just a few weeks ago. No grand party. No celebratory Instagram post with Meghan and the kids. No photos, no fanfare. Just quiet. Almost too quiet. A silence that felt loaded. Tense. Heavy with the weight of something unspoken. Sources close to the couple claimed he was taking time for reflection. But reflection on what? Behind closed doors, Harry was reportedly battling with something he could no longer ignore. An inner truth that had been clawing at him for years. One that he had buried beneath tabloid scandals, charity events, royal feuds, and endless interviews about trauma, therapy, and childhood wounds. But this one was different. This one bled every time he looked into the eyes of the children the world thought were his. Now imagine this. Harry sitting alone in his Montecito study. No staff, no Meghan, just him in a manila envelope. Inside, a collection of documents, some legal, some handwritten. One of them, a DNA test. Another, a letter from a trusted friend. And finally, a printed transcript of a voice recording from nearly 3 years ago. A voice he hadn't heard in years. A voice that said things no man should have to hear about his own children. Is this dramatic? Yes, but every bit of it is real. And Harry knew, deep down, he couldn't run anymore. But before we go deeper into the moment of confession, we need to ask, how did we even get here? How did the world's most famous prince go from cradling a newborn Archie in that iconic Windsor photo to questioning everything? It started with little things. Things the press ignored. Things we were all told were conspiracy theories. But they weren't. They were breadcrumbs. And now, those breadcrumbs form a trail straight to the truth. Let's talk about Archie's birth, for instance. Remember how secretive it was? Unlike William and Catherine, who proudly presented their children outside the Lindo wing, Harry and Meghan did something different. They avoided the press. Announced the birth after it allegedly happened. Even the location was confusing. First reported at Portland Hospital, but with no photographic evidence, no verified attending medical team, and no official record released to the public. Strange? Definitely. But the public let it slide. After all, Harry was the modern royal. And Meghan? She wanted privacy. But what happens when privacy turns into secrecy? And secrecy becomes silence? What about Lilibet? Born in California. No photos for months. No birth certificate publicly confirmed. The name alone sparked outrage. Naming her after Queen Elizabeth, without the monarch's formal consent. And yet again, no medical details. Just an announcement. A website, a logo, a brand. You begin to see the pattern, don't you? Each child's arrival surrounded by fog. carefully staged statements. No spontaneous moments. No unscripted joy. Just curated content for the masses. And still, Harry smiled. He smiled in interviews. Smiled at galas. Smiled in podcasts. But the smile didn't reach his eyes. Not the way it used to. Not the way it did when he held hands with Diana. Or laughed with William on their mother's memorial days. Something changed. Maybe you didn't notice. But he did. And the more time passed, the more impossible it became to pretend. Then came the accusations. Not from the public. No, those had already been dismissed as baseless theories. But from within. A former staff member. A nanny who left for personal reasons. A former friend of Meghan's. And finally, an ex-palace security guard. All of them began leaking strange little stories. Stories that seemed unrelated at first. But together, they painted a different picture. One person even said, "I worked for royals for decades. Children are usually everywhere. This time, I never heard a baby cry once." That's not nothing. Even the Netflix docuseries, which promised us a peek into the family's real life, failed to show real-time footage of either child. No new scenes. Just recycled images. Carefully framed shots. Silhouettes. Backs of heads. Glimpses. Not moments. And Harry? He looked uncomfortable. But why stay silent for so long? Because admitting the truth meant destroying everything. His marriage. His image. His fight for privacy. His American dream. And maybe even his relationship with the only people who ever stood by him when the crown turned cold. His children. Until, finally, he snapped. The birthday was the tipping point. On that day, Harry reportedly received a package. Not a gift. A challenge. Inside was a collection of everything he'd ignored for years, gathered by someone who claimed to be looking out for him. In it were files, recordings, photos, and a note that read, "You can keep pretending, or you can start healing." He didn't sleep that night. No one heard from him for 2 days. And then, without warning, he called his lawyer, then his therapist, then his father. And what he said next, we'll get to that. Because to understand what Harry confessed, we have to go back even further. Before the birthdays, before the Netflix deals, before America, we have to go back to the first secret he uncovered. A conversation he overheard. One that involved Meghan. One that never should have happened in their home. And once you hear what was said in that moment, you'll understand why Harry couldn't keep lying anymore. Because what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. What if the story Meghan Markle told the world about Archie's birth, about water breaking and hospital rooms and royal security waiting outside the door, never actually happened? What if someone who was supposed to be there wasn't? Not long after Prince Harry's whispered confession, "I am not their biological father," a woman came forward. She didn't scream for attention. She didn't run to the press for a paycheck. She reached out, quietly, anonymously, with a message that hit like a thunderclap. "I was scheduled for the birth. I was supposed to assist. But I never saw Meghan. Not once." The woman had been a licensed midwife for over 2 decades. She had delivered babies for celebrities, politicians, and yes, royals. Discreet. Professional. The kind of woman you hire when you want privacy without cutting corners. She was the one who should have been in the delivery room. And yet, on the day of Archie's supposed birth, May 6th, 2019, she says she was called off last minute. No reason given. No replacement named. Just removed. Think about that. Why would a trusted, experienced, discreet medical professional be pulled from the most highly anticipated royal birth of the year? And why was she never contacted again? She asked, of course. Sent a few polite messages. Just checking in. Hope all went well. Silence. Until a few weeks later, she saw the birth announcement on television like the rest of us. She didn't recognize anyone in the footage. Not a single doctor. Not a single nurse. The names listed in the press release. Ghosts. It didn't sit right with her. And that's when she started asking questions. Quietly. Carefully. But one call changed everything. A colleague she trusted confided something she never expected to hear. There was no delivery at Portland that day. At least, not by her. Let that sink in. No delivery. No hospital record. No medical team photos. No visible postpartum Meghan. Just a tidy statement, released after the fact, and a single press photo with a baby swaddled so tightly you couldn't even make out the curve of a nose. Now ask yourself, when has a royal birth ever looked like that? Princess Diana stood outside the hospital with Prince Charles just hours after giving birth. Bloated, exhausted, but real. Catherine, Princess of Wales, did the same 3 times. The world saw the struggle, the sweat, the messy joy of it all. But Meghan? She emerged days later. Glowing. Perfect makeup. No visible swelling. No sign she had just carried and delivered a child. A miracle? Or a mirage? The midwife kept her silence for years. Out of fear. Out of professional duty. Out of confusion. But then came Harry's 40th birthday. And his alleged confession. That's when she contacted someone close to Harry. Not a tabloid. Not a lawyer. A person she knew from a past case. Someone she believed would get the message to him safely. The message was short. Ask him why I never saw Meghan that day. Ask him who did. And just like that, the first thread of the story began to unravel. Because this wasn't just about one forgotten midwife. It was about what that absence represented. A cover-up? A carefully constructed narrative? Or something far more personal? We don't know what Harry said when he got that message. We don't know if he remembered her name. But we do know this. Shortly after, he made a private visit to someone who had worked in the security team at Portland Hospital. This man, an ex-military professional, confirmed that on the night of May 5th, no royal security detail was logged entering the facility. In fact, there was no record of any VIP suite being reserved under royal clearance. Instead, there was an odd gap in the shift logs. A section redacted after the fact, almost like someone went back in and erased the trail. Are we saying there was no baby? No. We're saying the birth, as told, does not match the evidence. That's the difference between a theory and a pattern. And when you lay it all out, the canceled midwife, the redacted records, the silent birthday, it starts to feel less like coincidence and more like choreography. Now let's pause and ask the hard question. If Meghan didn't give birth to Archie, who did? Was it a surrogate? That's the theory that's been whispered behind closed doors for years. Denied by the Sussexes, mocked by the mainstream press, but never definitively disproven. And here's where it gets even stranger. The midwife wasn't just removed from the delivery. She claims she later found out the delivery team was pulled from a completely different hospital, one that specialized in neonatal care for premature infants. That would imply Archie was born early, but the official timeline never changed. Meghan was reportedly due in April, gave birth in early May. But if she wasn't seen in public for weeks before and never showed a bump in real time, what exactly are we looking at? Photos don't lie, but they can mislead. Many of Meghan's late-stage pregnancy photos were taken in soft focus, often indoors, often tightly cropped, and more than one expert has noted inconsistencies in bump shape, height, and movement. One particularly striking photo taken in March 2019 shows Meghan's belly shifting position dramatically between 2 frames. Taken just minutes apart. Is that normal? Doctors say it's unusual. So let's go back again. To the moment of birth. Imagine the hospital room. The monitors. The staff. The cries. The paperwork. Now remove it all. Replace it with a private rented home. A nondescript house outside London. A quiet arrival. A locked suitcase. A baby already wrapped. Sounds cinematic, even paranoid. But sometimes, truth hides in fiction. Because here's what no one talks about. The British monarchy maintains strict documentation for royal births. All royal babies are traditionally issued formal notices, signed by medical staff, placed on easels outside Buckingham Palace. Archie's notice? Released online. No doctor's signature. No medical institution listed. No Buckingham Palace presentation. Just a statement. And it wasn't even shared by the palace. It came from the Sussexes press team. That's never happened before. You're starting to feel it now, aren't you? That tug in your chest that says, something's off. But what if Harry always knew? Or worse, what if he didn't? What if the truth about Archie's parentage wasn't just hidden from the public, but from Harry himself? What if, in his desperation to be a father, he never asked the one question that now haunts him? Are they really mine? And when that midwife's message came through, when her memory collided with the narrative he had repeated to himself for years, something broke. Because if the story of Archie's birth falls apart, then so does everything else. But what came next would shake Harry to his core. Because someone else, someone much closer, was about to break their silence. And what they said, no one saw it coming. What if the evidence had been hiding in plain sight all along? What if the one place we were told would give us an honest, unfiltered look into Harry and Meghan's family life? Their much-hyped Netflix documentary was actually where the cracks began to show. Because buried behind soft music, filtered lighting, and carefully curated scenes, there was something off, something hollow. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let's rewind to December 2022. Netflix's Harry and Meghan was being promoted as the tell-all of the decade. Promises of behind-the-scenes moments, unseen family footage, raw vulnerability. The Sussexes finally telling their story on their terms. People tuned in expecting drama, truth, realness. But what they got was choreography. You may remember it. The scene where Harry walks through the house carrying a baby monitor, or Meghan reading a book with Archie's laughter echoing in the background. Even the family playing by the beach, backlit like a commercial for a perfume brand. At first glance, it all felt beautiful, polished. But the deeper you look, the more questions start to surface. Let's start with something simple, Archie's voice. In multiple scenes, you hear Archie say things off camera. Phrases like, "Mommy's cooking," or "Where's Papa?" But not once, do we actually see his lips moving as he speaks.